Hi everyone. My name is Amber and my Eli project is titled Clean Up Isla Vista. If you don't know already, Isla Vista is a neighborhood full of fruit trees, for example, um, oranges, lemons, passion fruits. I've even seen banana and chilies in Isla Vista. However, this overall bounty is underutilized based on my observation and other peers. And my theory to this is due to busy student life and a high tenant turnover rate. For example, students are not really living in their apartments for more than 2 to 3 years, and most of the apartments in Ivy are owned by leasing companies and rented out to students. Zooming out too, in California, organic landfill waste is the second largest source of methane emissions, a potent greenhouse gas, which is overall contributing to our climate crisis here in California. One small-scale solution to this is the practice of gleaning, which is collecting leftover food from farms, gardens, markets that would otherwise be wasted. Locally, a program called Backyard Bounty, they're part of the Food Bank of Santa Barbara County. With properties that they're registered with, they collect and donate their excess fruit and redirect them to the community and those in need, for example, at their food bank. This background overall informed my mountaintop goal, which is to create long-lasting relationships in food recovery in our community, and also to raise awareness of local resources to combat food waste itself. One of the ways I wanted to go about this was connecting backyard bounding and registering properties in IV via the leasing companies to create a more long-lived and sustainable solution that maintains after I graduate and after all the students in IV all move on to the next chapter in their life. I wanted to do this by first surveying properties eligible to be gleaned in Isla Vista. This could be looking at what fruits there are, what company owns these properties, for example, Sierra, IVP, and Meridian. And my goal was to register at least 10 of these properties to Backyard Bounty. I also wanted to do this through participating in tabling events, email campaigns, cold calls, and other communication practices. Here's an example of a survey that I completed in around the third of the area of Isla Vista. You can see here that DP, Sabado, and Pasado have a really large number of trees and ivy. And one thing I didn't mention here was Sueño, too, which is the orchard kind of run and operated by Isla Vista in UCSB. However, that was excluded in my project because they're owned separately by the school. Overall, unfortunately, I was unable to gather any traction or any official registration with Backyard Bounty with the leasing companies and IVs. Some of the reason why I think this was possible, all this happened, was due to the lack of assertiveness and persistence within myself. While I did do a lot of emailing and cold calling, I think being a lot more assertive and continuing to push companies might have yielded better results. I also think I misunderstood my audience and maybe was a little hopeful in thinking that leasing companies and private property owners might be a little bit more caring to maybe environmental causes. But I think in the future, if I were to do this again, I would definitely pitch it more in of a service. I did, I guess, market my project as a service to clean up backyards for companies. But I think kind of amplifying that marketing tactic would be a lot more beneficial. Because of this, I adjusted my SMART goals to moving from more of a top-down approach of like sharing resources with our community from more of a bottom-up and targeting local Ivy residents. I wanted to do this by creating brochures and other promotional material highlighting local food and fruit recovery resources. And using my IRCA grant funding, I wanted to promote a fruit basket giveaway at different tabling events in Isla Vista, such as Ivy Earth Day and the Ivy Farmers Market, as well as also talking about my project at the IRCA Poster Colloquium. And I also wanted to continue to promote Backyard Bounty while not maybe directed at leasing companies, but I wanted to promote it to local residents to see if they can get the word into their landlords. One of the ways I did this is here in the middle with an email template for landlords, kind of distributed within IV for residents as well as through newsletters with sustainability, the ES department, and more. If you look at this, if you scan this QR code, you can see that it sends you to an email template with what Backyard Bounty is, what you can tell your landlord, and how your property can benefit from it. I also created the brochure that I mentioned here that was distributed in IV. I distributed by foot, and I had a lot of great conversation with Ivy residents on what they think is like the problem with their bounty in their backyard and maybe what could be done in the future. Here's an example of the fruit baskets that I did give away. I spent some time decorating these and was really happy that I was able to gain some sort of interest in my tabling events for people who do really care about wanting to decrease food waste in Isla Vista. Zooming out and reflecting on my project, I think the first thing I would definitely do is expanding to Goleta. Initially, I wanted to work in Isla Vista to create a more hyper-local impact on my community. However, expanding to Goleta might mean that I have more interactions with people who actually own their property and live on their property, and maybe they have a more deeper connection to their property that I live in, and this could result in better engagement and probably higher registration rates with Backyard Bounty. I also learned, as I mentioned earlier, to be a lot more aggressive in future work in any type of project, and especially environmental projects when um, it might be more of a bubble in where I'm standing. But I think to get the message out there to the general public that maybe don't care as much about the environment is to be a lot more aggressive. I wanted to probably exhaust my communications resources. I did emails, letters, phone calls, but I think social media is a platform that I didn't really tap into. Um, because I think I was more nervous to see what the reaction would be online. And in the beginning, my project was more, um, I guess, geared towards an older population, for example, companies and managers in leasing companies. So I didn't think of social media at first. But with my adjusted SMART goals, I think social media could have been a really good addition to my project. Finally, I learned a lot about myself as a leader, even though my project quote unquote failed and went a different direction to how I initially started. One thing I really learned that I think could be applicable in any project as a leader is that your audience really matters. For my project specifically, business owners and college students have really different values and priorities, and this really should have informed my pitch a lot better. For example, for when talking to business owners, I think I could have tapped into more of the policy and legal side of composting and food recovery, for example, through the SB 1383 bill. And I also learned that adapting to failure is really key to growth and leadership. And being flexible, honestly, is one of the biggest lessons I learned because Eli not only taught me about communication, about project management, but also about adapting and kind of being able to think on the go and still and understanding what your overall goal was. Because I think in the end, I was still able to work with my overarching mountaintop goal, which was kind of spreading resources and awareness about food recovery and food waste. So I think being flexible is something I learned. I also learned that quality of your work is much better than quantity, and everyone has finite energy. So I think if I were to do this again, I would definitely understand what my commitments are throughout the year so I can put a lot more energy investment into something like the Eli project there that needs a lot of mental energy. But yeah, thank you. I just wanted to put in a good word for Jenna and Erica because they helped my project progress throughout the quarters and gave me a lot of feedback whenever I needed to adapt and be flexible in my project. Thank you.